Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 12. And for all the excitement, the optimism, and everything that looked great from a viewing standpoint for Week 11, Week 12 may take is the statement that beauty is in the eye of the beholder to the next level, but that's why they have the betting lines involved. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, some interesting games on the docket this week, even if we don't have those marquee matchups, other than what we're going to be treated to on Monday Night Football between the Ravens and Chargers.
What week is it?
Week 12, I think, last I checked.
Okay, week 12. Yeah, you put a little spice on the 12 there when you initially announced it.
Well, sometimes you have to break through that wall, and so these are the dog days of the season. From about week 10 to, week 14, we haven't had our bye week yet, which is coming, and, you have to try and fight through the adversity, deal with the nicks, aches, and pains, and make sure that you are healthy for the stretch run.
We are certainly fighting through some adversity forward-facing. There's no doubt about that. All right.
Want to talk some football?
In terms of the games this week, I initially was like, the card ain't great. There's some interesting matchups here, and I think we'll have a couple of them, break some down. I think there's some good stuff here a little later in the week.
We will make chicken salad out of chicken shit, and we will start things off.
I just think you're negative.
Suddenly I'm the negative
game
guy around here, huh?
49ers, Packers, a lot of incest there. Good Sunday nighter with Eagles and Rams, and then Monday, got a doozy. I think the
Monday night game.
Look,
the Monday night game
bad.
I'm legitimately excited about. I mean, the Monday night game is the crown jewel of the schedule, and when they put it all together, you circled that date. And unlike some of the standalone games that we have seen, this one should be worth its weight in gold and have some major playoff ramifications in the AFC.
The corporate marketing minds, the Harbaugh. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, well,
bad
I mean,
all right, let's get to this game here. Browns Steelers.
All right, we'll do Browns Steelers. Yeah. As that's the game to kick things off on Thursday night. The Pittsburgh Steelers, a modest 3.5 point favorite for their annual trip to Cleveland to take on the Brownies. Total on this game has come down from the open where we were in that 39.5-40 range. We are now down to 36.5 and 37. Mother Nature, Payne, going to have her say on the banks of Lake Erie tonight. And before we even get into some of the X's and O's and a matchup or two that you might be intrigued to watch, you are our resident meteorologist. What does that lovely weather forecast suggest for you when you can't predict lake effect, wind, rain, and or snow?
It's funny. I have been crowned that. I believe it started from the baseball side of things. But
we don't need to get into barometric pressure like you used to with baseball totals.
So that is the weather's the biggest factor tonight. It's been the largest reason for movement in this game. And, if you looked Monday morning, I wasn't sure they're going to play the game. The projections were talking about 54-mile-per-hour gusts and steady winds approaching the 30s, and there was going to be just inches and inches of rain and snow. And that's the only reason the total went from, you had a look-ahead number of 42 last week down to as low as 35.5 on Monday, and it was a reopen of 40.5, 40 on Sunday. So that got pummeled pretty good. Now we've kind of settled back in, 36.5, 37 first thing as we record this Thursday morning, and the forecast doesn't look nearly as severe, right? Gusts in the 18 to 20 mile per hour range, steady stuff, kind of in that like 7 to 15 range. It still should be some stuff coming down, a little wintry mix. So the one thing I will say is it's by the lake. And so lake effect is very difficult to capture an actual weather forecast that you can find online. So from now until kickoff, this game's going to move basically, I would say, because of social media, right? You're going to see people sending out videos and pictures, tailgating around the stadium, pregame shows covering the weather, and I think based upon how this looks is where the moves transpire here in the market. So I know for all those that kind of rushed to this total Sunday night, Monday morning, it was only because of the weather. The actual price and the matchup didn't get you anywhere close to a number in the mid to high 30s. In fact, if there wasn't weather, you'd be making a case for this over based on how things have trended with these two teams. Jameis Winston pushing the ball down the field. Number 2 in intended air yards on the season, 10.1 yards. You would typically buy an offense in terms of positive regression that only scored 14 points the week prior and 443 yards of offense, right? And Kevin Stefanski, if you look, has Winston dropping back to throw on 70% of snaps because the run game has been pretty non-existent for Cleveland. And then you flip it around to the other side. Russell Wilson, 3rd in the NFL in percentage of 20-plus yard pass attempts at 16%. He's hunting deep shots. His best throw is the moon ball. They've enhanced the wide receiver group there with Mike Williams. And since week 8, you also look in that correlation to Russell Wilson kind of expanding the aggressiveness of Pittsburgh's throw game. The Browns' defense has given up gobs of explosives, right? They're in the bottom half of the league in EPA per dropback allowed. If you throw on the all-22, especially last week.
You didn't love Juan Thornhill and his desire to do absolutely nothing?
There was a couple guys there in the old back end of Cleveland that were trotting around. Let's just say that. So there was some quit from the Cleveland's Browns defensive players. Some of them, not all. So the Browns have a very boom or bust defense right now where they've done a decent job negating completions, but when they give them up, it's a league worst, nearly 13 yards per completion. So that kind of correlates with potentially Russell finding some deep balls that, had there been 54-mile-an-hour gusts, that would have been negated a little bit. From what I've been told, and maybe just the perfect example of Mother Nature having us kind of by the balls for this game right now, both of the offensive coordinators, I believe one said publicly and the other one a little more on the private side of things, even though it's been a short week, they have 2 completely different game plans prepared for tonight. One for incredibly shitty weather, and then if the weather subsides, a completely different one that is, let me just put this, much more aggressive. Let's put it that way. And so candidly, like the weather is just going to dictate the total inside with how this shapes up closer to kickoff.
I was going to ask you about that. From a weather standpoint and the side, we can clearly figure out the correlation between bad weather and why the total is getting bet under. Do you think one team benefits that much more in inclement weather? It's the Steelers that want to run the football?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Browns have just not been able to run the ball at all.
No, Nick Chubb has looked like a shell of himself and banged up along the offensive line. Not a great recipe.
Yeah. The offensive line that was supposed to be much healthier last week was, but left tackle goes down early in the game, snaps his leg in half, and Jedrick Wills wasn't quite ready, and so you went all the way down to your 3rd string left tackle there for the Browns. So that could be the interesting matchup. They're going to have to figure out how to help protect Jameis if he's pushing the ball downfield to give him time to do that. But you listen, you give kudos to that Steelers defense coming up with the right game plan. And I also think, if you kind of poke around and gather some intel, how the Steelers operated last week offensively, their game plan was to marry the defense. They wanted to keep Baltimore off the field. So they focused on possession. I believe they held the ball for like 36, 37 minutes. Arthur Smith, I believe, mentioned this in one of his pressers. That game plan is probably a little bit different here, right? You're not really fearing Cleveland's offense to where you're going to maybe run at the slowest pace possible at a detriment to your own offense. But that was kind of the game plan last week. So again, having heard the potential for game plans here, you better pray on the weather showing up if you have an undertaking.
And you've seen some of that reflected not just in the top-line markets, but the player props and everything else as better and bookmakers scramble to kind of move these numbers accordingly, trying to figure out what the playing conditions will look like on Thursday Night Football. Payne, we don't have to worry about playing conditions when we get to Sunday, where it's climate-controlled at Lucas Oil Stadium, and the Detroit Lions take their gaudy win-loss record and ATS success on the road to take on the Colts as a 7.5-point favorite. Total on the game sits at 50. The Lions, they have their best 10-game start since 1934 at 9-1. They can clinch back-to-back 10-win seasons for the first time in franchise history and actually have the best record in the NFL at 21-6 over the past 2 regular seasons thus far. They're 5-0 on the road for the first time ever. Only team undefeated on the road this season. Keep in mind they've played 1 game on natural grass coming in the inclement weather at Lambeau Field against the Packers. They do come into this spot off a 52-6 win against Jacksonville, tied the NFL record with their third 38-plus point win this season, outgained the Jags by 475 yards, best by any team in the league since 1979, and became the 3rd team since 2000 to score a touchdown on their first 7 drives of the game. But don't sleep on the Colts. They're now 1 game behind the Broncos in their push for the AFC wildcard spot towards the bottom. An impressive come-from-behind victory last week as a 4-point underdog against the Jets. 10 of 11 games so far this season for Indy have been decided by 1 score. It's the most in the NFL. The Colts have actually played 19 one-score games under head coach Shane Steichen. They've compiled an 11-8 straight-up record, 14-5 against the number. And Sunday's price, should it hold, will mark the largest home underdog price tag attached to the Colts since 2017. What have they done as home underdogs of 7 or more over the last 30 seasons? 7-1 against the number. Anthony Richardson also thrived in a limited sample size, 6-2 ATS in the 8 games where he's caught points. Payne, this game fascinating for a variety of reasons. The Lions continue to be a runaway freight train. They have dominated the AFC South. Jared Goff bounces back after a lackluster performance on Sunday Night Football against the Houston Texans with a perfect passer rating. Dan Campbell seems to be of the Steve Spurrier, Bob Stoops, fuck you tour, where we're just going to curb stomp everybody we can and try and cover numbers no matter what, to try and keep our boosters happy. But this is a Colts team that did make the change from Joe Flacco to Anthony Richardson, and Richardson rewarded them with his best performance as an NFL quarterback last week. From an accuracy standpoint, showed his versatility as a runner with 2 rushing touchdowns. Fascinating game on a variety of fronts. What's the one matchup that stands out most to you when Dan Campbell and Shane Steichen match wits in Indianapolis on Sunday afternoon?
So the board is really thin this week in terms of value, and there's about 5 games as I count right now that 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 games that I have gotten differing sides on from the group. So not only is it a little thin right now, but there's more battles than I've seen before. But the 2 ideas I've been at least asked about in this game are pretty straightforward, right? It's a Lions teaser down, and then it's the Colts at 7.5 or better. And the second part of that is under the premise that Detroit couldn't possibly be a 4-point favorite over the Bills on a neutral field right now, which this price indicates, right? Buffalo just recently went into Indianapolis and like 4.5 point favorite there, and I thought, Buffalo was probably a little fortunate there based upon how that game started, scoring 10 points on 29 yards. If the Colts are going to stay within this number, they have to find their run game. I mean, that to me is the biggest key here. Shane Steichen has to solve that problem. On paper, with Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, this should be a really efficient ground game. Last week, the Colts could not run on the Jets. And so I understand the Colts got there, and there was some money on the Colts from one faction. There was Jets money from another faction. But the folks who were on the Colts got paid. But if you asked them before the game, how are you going to win this game? How are you going to cover it? They would have told you it was the Colts ground game. And it was non-existent, right? And so that's what's interesting to me, because we saw the Jets defense basically quit in the Arizona game. And we had its head coach now, interim head coach, and Jeff Ulbrich quite literally going high school football mode, working on tackling drills for 2 straight days with those Jets players. And it was a Jets defense in the bottom 10 in both EPA and success rate allowed against the run. Somehow the Jets defense held the Colts to a 30% rushing success rate and 2.6 yards a carry combined for Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson on 34 attempts. Part of that issue for Indy's offense is what's kind of transpired along the offensive line, right? You have guard Will Freeze on IR, starting center Ryan Kelly is on IR, starting tackle Bernard Raham did not practice last week and missed the game, has not practiced yet this week. We'll have to see what it looks like today at Thursday's practice. If Rahm's out again, the Colts will be starting 3 rookies along the offensive line. And so can you take advantage of where you probably need to take advantage of the Lions, right? The goal here would be to run the ball, keep the offense off the field because they are running hot right now, obviously. But what's interesting is despite the injuries in the front 7 that the Lions have kind of endured throughout the course of the season, DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil, along with a really aggressive nature, still has the Lions defense top 5 in schedule-adjusted run defense. Now, the Lions suffered another injury to their front 7. It's the green dot linebacker there. Alex Anzalone out 6 to 8 weeks with a broken forearm. First-round pick Will Campbell is having a breakout season. He's going to handle the green dot role this week in terms of lining people up and getting the plays in from Glenn. Malcolm Rodriguez, who's been basically linebacker 2B or 3, whatever you want to say here, he's played more than 220 snaps already this season. He's going to elevate into Alex Anzalone's role. He's been a starter before. He's graded out actually better than Anzalone. He's been in Aaron Glenn's system since his rookie season. I don't know how much of a downgrade this actually is. We usually look, and that's the other factor here for me, is like when you think about these quarterbacks that are mobile, right, they have a raised floor. And you can kind of rely on their rushing output to kind of fall back on. And so from like a rushing perspective, you would think high floor here for Anthony Richardson. And maybe it is because Detroit's allowed some quarterbacks to have success running the ball because they're so yeah, well, it's not just Geno, but that Lions defense is so aggressive. We've seen like even Baker Mayfield, right? Sam Darnold, Mason Rudolph, right, have been able to use their legs against Detroit. So that's probably going to be the way that the Colts and Anthony Richardson, need to combat pressure is maybe on the scrambles. But there's where I think the variance lies is maybe, in the throw game for Anthony Richardson. Last week, again, if you asked anyone who was betting the Colts before the game, how do you envision this going? How do you envision this playing out? How do you envision getting a cover here? It's like, the Colts are going to be able to run the ball really well. We already discussed they couldn't. It ended up being AR's arm and that game-winning drive for the cover and an outright win. Richardson was 9 for 13 on throws, 10-plus yards. He had only completed 31% of those passes prior this year. So it kind of just depicts a larger delta in outcomes when you have a quarterback like AR. If he's on and the ground game's going a little bit, wouldn't be surprised if the Colts took this game to the wire. If he's the guy that completes 30% of his balls downfield like he had prior to last week, Colts probably don't have a prayer here. Josh Downs has a favorable matchup in the slot. Lions have done a really good job removing outside receivers this season. I'm interested to see Shane's game plan here to attack the middle of the field. You got to put Campbell and Rodriguez in conflict coverage, basically, is maybe the one weak spot for them. Offensively for the Lions, you'd expect a solid performance here, right? Ben Johnson can kind of create a game plan knowing what he's going to see. Jared Goff can mentally and physically prep for what he's going to see here because there just aren't any surprises really from Gus Bradley. You're going to get cover 3. And occasionally that has fooled Goff this season. He'll throw you the ball. He's got 6 picks against cover 3. However, the other end of that spectrum is Goff is top 5 in completion rate, yards per attempt, and touchdown rate against cover 3 this season. So there's a lot of variance to this game, but it comes down to price, and you're going to have to maybe be the one that pushes us over the top here if this is the route we elect to go a little bit later. But the Colts have to be able to run the ball, and if you can get some semblance of last week's Anthony Richardson here in this spot, then the Colts just seem somewhat in the mix here based upon a price that maybe is a a touch inflated.
It's starting to get to a point where you're paying a premium for the Lions, and you can understand why, given how this team has done nothing but print money at the betting window for their backers throughout the course of the season, especially when they step down in class. Colts defense, to your point, a very interesting unit. EPA numbers, above average, but total defense numbers, not exactly anything to write home about, so they're going to need to force those turnovers, make life a little bit easier on their sophomore quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Sunday morning Sunday early afternoon into the late afternoon, depending on what time zone you call home. Seattle and Arizona paying a key showdown in the NFC West. This game has been a little bit of a battle right around the pick'em. The total has remained largely unchanged. We'll call 47.5. Kind of the consensus in this particular game. Cardinals, first place in the NFC West with a record of 6-4 after finishing last year at 4-13. They could go from worst to first in the division for the first time in franchise history. They come into this game well rested off the bye, have won an NFL high 2 games when trailing by multiple scores in the fourth quarter of this season. The rest of the NFL has 4 wins between 31 teams. And credit to the Cardinals, they won 3 games when trailing in the final 2 minutes of regulation this season, tied for the most in the league alongside the Atlanta Falcons. Meanwhile, for the Seahawks, this home field advantage has more or less been non-existent this year, losing 4 straight at home, their longest home losing streak since 2008. They come in fresh off of an upset win against the San Francisco 49ers, 20-17 with Geno Smith, game-winning rushing touchdown with under 15 seconds left to play, breaking a long losing skid against one of their divisional rivals. The Seahawks, though, not exactly great from an ATS standpoint in home divisional games, 1-6 over the last 7. But Kyler Murray, the one thing we have grown accustomed to with Murray, road unders, especially in the division, have been a profitable outcome for Kyler in terms of the way the Cardinals have gone about their business. But Payne, going through Arizona's resume, I can't figure out this team, yet it seems like every single week we're invested in their games more often than not. Defensively, you go through player personnel, nothing stands out. They lose one of their most disruptive players. Team doesn't really miss a beat in wins against the Bears and the Jets. Again, not sure how much we can take away from either of those, but Murray also seems to be in a lot more firm control of what he's being asked to do in Drew Petzig's offense. I mean, completion percentage up, he's been more efficient running the football, and he's spreading the ball around to some under-the-radar weapons to a certain extent, getting Trey McBride involved, Marvin Harrison Jr., the rookie out of Ohio State, and a complimentary ground game against the Seahawks defense that, look, we had questions about what was going on from a player personnel standpoint and why they were parting ways with more or less their entire linebacking core. Paid dividends last week. Can it pay dividends again this week against the rested Arizona team?
Fantasy guys are going to be in your DMs calling you a bumbling idiot for thinking Trey McBride and Maserati Marv are under the radar weapons.
That's fair. It's a fair point.
So one of the games that I mentioned was a battle. Here we are. We've seen Arizona +1 get hit, swing across to 0. Seattle +1 gets hit yesterday. Pick is now the consensus number, but there are books dealing -1 in both directions. Massive win for Seattle last week. They finally got over the hump. They slayed the Dragon, or their version of the Dragon, which was the 49ers. Arizona off the bye. You'd expect a coaching staff that is showing it's clearly on the plus side of things with scheme and game plans and adjustments to have a solid effort here in this spot. To your point, I think, which is more maybe interesting, and we'll get to the matchups here, but it kind of came to mind, is the Cardinals were bought this offseason by pros over their win total. Those same pros, to your point, have been really active in their games of late, backed them against the Chargers on Monday night, fade them against the Dolphins, back against the Bears, fade against the Jets, and it's been with mixed results, obviously, in that equation. Probably, I'm looking, it was a 2-2, probably should be 3-1. The Dolphins game was a little fugazi there, but the reason for backing them in these spots is it's kind of been matchup specific. And so I'm really interested to see how Drew Petzig attacks Seattle's defense. You'd think it's a run-first game plan, especially if weather is in play from some of these bomb cyclones going through there.
You were waiting to say
James
bomb
Conner.
cyclone. So for those scoring at home, if you had over about 24 and a half minutes on the podcast, you now can cash your bet.
It says 23:41 on my end. I'm a little concerned now that
Well,
our files
remember,
are not going to merge
no,
here.
when the file goes live,
that's
there's
right.
an
You already,
intro,
you're smarter than me.
and there's a
Yeah,
couple
you
of other
do.
dynamics in play here, kind
Yeah.
sir.
Yep. Yeah, you just you pulled the tin cup and pointed your club towards the
and hit the ball
the gravel
with a 7-iron
road there.
right
that
down
was good.
the road.
Yeah. So, if weather's in play, James Conner is going to be a focal point here. He's been extremely efficient, top 5 back in success rate. If you look at season-long metrics, though, the Seahawks have struggled to defend the run, 25th in success rate allowed. However, a lot of injuries to the front seven, creating some noise in those numbers for a group that's a little bit healthier. We'll see the status of Leonard Williams. Mike McDonald has clearly shuffled around the linebacker pieces, as you mentioned. There were changes during the bye as well. Last 2 games, Seattle's run defense has faced McVay and Shanahan. And so, and with that comes Kyron and CMC. Just a 33% rushing success rate allowed, minus 0.23 EPA per rush surrendered. Both marks were good for 6th over the last 2 weeks. The other part of the matchup is the way Seattle elects to play coverage. They've gotten healthier in the back end there with Reek Woolen's return. Witherspoon was battling through a little injury that he was playing through that not many knew about. They made some changes to increase their man coverage rates. It's up 11% the last 3 weeks. They played it on 46% of dropbacks last week against the 49ers. It's somewhat surprising, but I think we've talked about this multiple times here the past 2-3 seasons in regards to Kyler Murray's very pronounced splits against man coverage. Substantially better against zone than he is man. If you look against man, Kyler Murray's completion rate is 19% lower than it is against zone this season. From top 5 against man to well below average against zone. He's not nearly as threatening downfield for whatever reason. He's just not seeing it as well. A-dot dips, and so does the yards per pass attempt. It nearly slices in half. So this also feels like a little bit of a step up in class in recent times for Arizona's offense. They face the Dolphins defense dealing with a slew of injuries on their unit, not just the obvious ones from the beginning of the season with guys they let go in free agency, but particularly what they had, right? Zach Sealer gets randomly poked in the eye on like Thursday, and he's not there for the Dolphins. You had Javon Holland depart in the first quarter with a knee injury. Kadir Kahu was not in that game, the starting Dolphins slot corner. So, and then what was it? Back-to-back weeks against the Bears and Jets defenses where you threw on the all-22 and you've listened to the coaches and you've listened to the players and you've listened to media covering the team. You saw quit from both those defenses that Arizona went against. And so it just feels like maybe if you're someone who thinks Seattle's defense is somewhere in that like 20 range, you're probably going to have to tick that up a little bit. And so the market might be a little bit lower on Seattle's defense relative to how we view them right now that they're a little bit healthier, Todd. And Arizona offensively, like they've had some nice matchups the last 3 outings. So it's led to Kyler Murray having 65% of his passing yards coming after the catch. How does that happen? Well, 26 missed tackles between those Bears and Jets defenses.
Funny how that seems to work with lack of effort and quit.
Right.
You can't tackle guys.
Yeah, so it's just not a sustainable number. But I haven't done anything with this game yet. I usually sit out the battles unless something later in the week becomes a little bit more concrete. Would certainly keep your eyes on the weather, though, in regards to the total. We've seen a touch of under money at 48. I would think if, literally and figuratively dancing between the raindrops, there is some weather that comes in late morning here. There is some weather that comes in late evening. If any of those systems kind of move quicker or slower, it could plop itself down on this game. So I would just kind of keep your eye on the weather for this one. Right now, as we record, it looks like it's going to hit the perfect middle ground where it's kind of clear. But again, if those systems speed up or slow down, it could make itself, right around game time here. So just kind of keep your eyes peeled.
Seahawks, such an interesting team. 1-5, their straight up record heading into the bye. They, of course, get the upset win against the 49ers. And not only do they get Arizona this week, they'll play the Cardinals twice over the span of the next 3 weeks with a game on the road at MetLife Stadium against the Jets, sandwiched in between. So we'll get a much better indication of who Seattle is, and Arizona, who actually is the favorite to win the division at a lot of prominent sports books, right around a pick'em price tag, with the 49ers nestled in there as the 2-shot, who we'll get to in just a matter of moments, and the Rams and Seahawks, the long shots on the board. And as I say all that out loud, didn't realize we were covering all 4 teams in the division today. You get to follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider.
It's wide open.
Right? It's wide open. It is the model of parity.
Yeah.
It is the NFL's version of the Big 12, the way I kind of look at it right now.
Man, the crazy part is the teams in that division, despite, 3 of them are at 5-5, one of them at 6-4, they actually all have upside.
Oh, they all are capable of making a run.
If they get hot, they can make a run.
I mean, you would probably make the case that any of those teams on their best day are in that second tier behind only the Eagles and Lions.
Nobody in the Big 12 is making a fucking run.
Don't tell that to Colorado fans who have been prominent in our mentions after our Travis Hunter tirade to kick off yesterday's college show.
I believe he's catching another wide receiver screen 2 yards past the line of scrimmage against the Big 12 defense that's 130th in pass defense and has 9 defenders.
Look, a negative A-dot almost got Bo Nix the Heisman last year, so that was the quarterback position. We may as well do the same thing with a wide receiver. You can follow Payne, though, on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, for all things Bet the Board, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, and do want to plug our resident prop handicapper, Billy. You can follow him at Watt_05 for all of his great content. But I mentioned the NFC.
Boy, he got fucked Monday. I thought that was a rocking chair winner. First play of the fucking game. We're gone.
I mean, it's pretty much the nature of the beast in terms of how these things go. I mean, Nico Collins is dancing into the tunnels deep into the Dallas night.
Wasn't
after
touched.
A screen pass.
80 yards.
I mean, that would have been a touchdown in a turkey bowl and flag football, given the way things went there.
Yeah,
but alas, it is, of course, how things go around these parts and why we continue to grind and bang our heads into the wall. NFC West, mentioned those teams, and, of course, one of them will play on Sunday Night Football. We'll get there in a moment, but the 49ers back on the road again, this time to take on the Green Bay Packers. And it's Green Bay, a modest 1.5, 2-point home favorite at Lambeau Field. Total in the game, 47.5. And it's a battle of bottom feeders in terms of red zone execution so far this season. 49ers, 26 in the red zone. The Packers, a tick behind them at 27th. A rematch of a 2023 NFC divisional game where the 49ers outlasted the Green Bay Packers as nearly a double-digit favorite, 24-21. It was a game-winning Christian McCaffrey touchdown with 1:07 left in the game after Anders Carlson missed a 41-yard field goal, something that hasn't been lost on Jordan Love. And answering comments about the game this week, how important it would be, said you can't change the past, but there is no doubt this game has a little bit of added emphasis. You mentioned at the top of the show incest and coaching familiarity. This would be the ultimate poster child for such an occurrence. A bevy of coaching crossover going all the way back to 2008, 2009, where it felt like 37 of these coaches were all members of the Houston Texans organization. You know, Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan spent time together in Washington, Atlanta. Robert Saleh, who's now come in as an analyst, consultant, whatever the hell he wants to be called for Green Bay, knows those guys intimately. And the 49ers, though, Payne, will have a little bit of history end Sunday that'll snap a streak of 37 straight games where the Niners are listed as a regular season favorite, fourth longest streak by any team since the 1970s. 49ers haven't been able to hold leads. Saw that on full display against the Seattle Seahawks, but the Green Bay Packers, not exactly stout in their own right, an ability to create separation. Pretty fortunate to get the outright win against the Bears with a missed field goal late. Injuries, of course, a major concern. Brock Purdy didn't throw, was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday. No reason to believe that'll be anything serious. Nick Bosa, a DNP, something to monitor as we get closer to kickoff. But an interesting game. Two teams that know each other well, two coaching staffs that come from, very similar coaching trees. The world is your oyster in terms of what angles you'd like to attack in breaking down this particular handicap.
So I know you have a little bit of a stronger opinion on this game than I do, because there's a lot of moving parts here. Yeah, I rarely get a little Sunday afternooner. You must have you're like, hey, I'm going for a run, and then I came back and you must have saw the light there. I
should have gone for a 37-mile run after watching the Browns for the final 25 minutes of that fucking football game.
Oof, brutal. It was really the last 16 minutes.
Okay.
Brock Purdy will play. He's obviously battling a little bit of a shoulder issue. George Kittle has vowed to play, obviously dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury. Trent Williams battling an ankle injury. Debo still not 100%. Jair Alexander left after 10 snaps for the Packers last week with a knee injury, did not practice on Wednesday. So there's a lot of things happening here with injuries. And you kind of wonder, was it just like this picture-perfect defensive game plan for Mike McDonald last week, or did the injuries catch up to San Francisco? I mean, Brock Purdy did not push the ball downfield. Season low, 5.8 intended air yards. Didn't attempt a single pass, 20-plus yards. 19 of Purdy's 26 attempts were 6 yards or shorter. So, again, is this a little bit of shoulder injury? Is this just, McDonald being a wizard with 2 weeks to prepare, having seen the offense already? It's probably a little bit of both. There's some noise maybe in the numbers because of the pass catcher injuries this season. For San Francisco, right? Ayuk's been down, Debo, Kittle, Jennings, they've all been injured and missed games, but Brock Purdy's splits against man and zone coverage have been quite large, far better against zone. Does Jeff Hafley throw on the tape from last week, though, and say, have to go man? And if he identifies that man is a better option, can he execute it with his personnel if Jair Alexander can't go? So there's just a lot of moving parts here for me, and I think for everyone that was assuming Hafley was going to run this more aggressive defense, or the most aggressive defense in the league, was kind of what we were hearing, right? Man coverage this, it was going to be. It really hasn't been the case. 17th on the season for Green Bay and Hafley in man coverage usage. I think he's kind of comprehended he doesn't have the horses to fully execute this. And I think that statement becomes maybe even more clear if Jair can't go this week.
I was going to say he may have predicated a lot of his decisions expecting Jair to be healthy, but we know Jair plays about 4 regular season games every year for the Green Bay Packers.
He's been playing through a knee thing that probably is going to require some work in the offseason.
Clean up.
Is my understanding there. Yeah. So I think these injuries are kind of causing, on both sides, a wide range of outcomes, especially on this side of the ball, right? Kittle has a massive impact on the run game, right? The 49ers run game last few weeks has not been efficient with CMC, but then it's like, oh, well, Kittle's beat up as well, and Trent Williams is beat up as well, and so it's like minus 0.16 EPA per rush in CMC's return, good for 21st in the league. It was far more efficient earlier in the season with other running backs. On paper, this should be a good matchup for the 49ers run game. Green Bay is 6th worst in success rate allowed to running backs. They're allowing the highest combined first down and touchdown rates to running backs at more than 27%. The other side of the ball is also interesting to me, right? Days after the Jets fired Robert Slaw, he was brought in he was just kind of seen around Green Bay practices.
For those that don't realize, Green Bay is not close to New York City, so it would not normally be a suburb you're casually driving through.
So he was brought in by Matt LaFleur. They're great friends, believe they were best men at each other's weddings. And so people were just like, hey, this is kind of the gist of it. And then he was eventually named, when I say he, Robert Slaw was named as an offensive analyst. And I think nobody really thought anything of it. And then you start to look at the Packers' schedule down the stretch. It's the 49ers this week. Salah was the architect of that 49ers defense. He knows the players. The guy built, I kind of used this example to you off air, but it's like, the guy that builds the airplane probably can dismember it and dismantle it quicker than anyone. And so when you have like the Dolphins and the Vikings who are also on the schedule down the stretch, this was a chess move by LaFleur that we'll see if it ultimately pays off. But he knows the areas to attack of that 49ers defense, since, again, he was pretty much the architect of it. Nick Bosa injury is a massive one. He's a tough guy. I'm sure he's going to try to gut this thing out, right? He's got a hip. He's got an oblique injury. I know you'll see 2 sacks last week. He's just not the same, right? Could only play 26 snaps. Once the shot wore off, Bosa literally could not get off the line of scrimmage, so I would envision...
I was going to say the difference between watching Bosa in the first half and his disruptive capabilities versus looking like just another guy in the second half.
Literally could not, literally could, he would try to get off the line of scrimmage, he would just stop on some snaps, and then you'd see him trot off to the sidelines. So, okay, some things coming in right now.
ADD Payne is our favorite Payne.
Well, I mean, I'm just getting some text messages here. So I don't know what you're going to get from Bosa. I would envision it's limited snaps again. The combination of Salah finding areas to attack his former defense, Bosa down, hopefully helps in a big way here because the 49ers have been pretty stingy defending the pass. Renardo Green has been fantastic as a rookie. Charvarius Ward looks like he'll return this week. It's going to maybe take him a little bit of time to ramp up back to game speed. I think he's missed, 3 weeks now, unfortunately, with a tragic family incident. But you can attack the 49ers defense in the slot. And so that's where Jayden Reed lives. A touch less than 80% of his routes come from the slot. The 49ers are the second worst defense in yards per target allowed to slot receivers. But the injuries will determine where this line goes. If both sides were fully healthy and you gave Green Bay for their environment a full 3 for home field advantage, you're looking at like pick here. There's just a lot of moving parts right now, and I think today's practice report later in the day will probably help uncover some things, Todd, where this probably trends. I've seen both ideas again on this game in that, getting the 49ers in a teaser in a air quotes must-win situation was attractive. I've also seen some cheap money line prices bought on the Packers as well. So.
Final question I have for you on this game, and not just as it pertains to this matchup, but overall what you've seen. Jordan Love's starting to become one of the more polarizing quarterbacks. And I know we have a lot of diehard Green Bay Packers fans that tune into the show. We were detractors for the tail end of the Aaron Rodgers experience. We were buyers of Green Bay last year and needed Love to get white hot down the stretch. What have you seen or made of his play? Because you see some throws and go, hey, that's the guy that can be a franchise quarterback. And then there's nothing but head-scratching decisions where you go, who the hell are you even throwing the football to?
That's the full Jordan Love experience right now. The highs are extremely high. The lows are head-scratching. In his defense, he's battled through some injuries this season. He's played through some injuries that maybe you would have said, hey, sit this one down. Put it all together, he's about middle of the pack right now in terms of EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. I think, you take the good with the bad in terms of like his age, in terms of his actual playing experience, having sat behind Aaron Rodgers for so long. There's still not a ton of NFL reps that he's gone out there and had. So I think your hope is, with more reps, more familiarity in the system, some of those head-scratching plays maybe start to get removed from his game, and you're looking at a higher floor with the peak upside potential. But the talent is endless. I just think when you're looking at him right now, what do we have? As I go through this and remove unqualified quarterbacks. So he's 15th right now, actually, in terms of qualifying quarterbacks in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. It's the downside stuff. Clean that up a little bit, and you're going to have a premier quarterback.
It is the gunslinger mentality that Green Bay fans have become all too accustomed to watching, but they've seen the upside in a player like Brett Favre, who handed the baton off to Aaron Rodgers, who went out there and performed at a high level. So should be one hell of a game Sunday afternoon. Talking about the 49ers sitting at 5-5, I know we, along with our listeners, have exposure to their win total under. It would be great if we got a little 49ers loss on Sunday and get to the window there after the Cowboys officially cashed for all of us last week with their loss on Monday Night Football against the Texans. Final game on the docket, kind sir. Sunday Night Football out in Los Angeles. It's Philadelphia off of their mini bye, taking on the LA Rams, who are at a travel disadvantage, having played in New England last week, but exceeding odds makers' expectations with a narrow cover in that spot. Philly, depending on where you shop, 2.5-point favorite, soft 3, the prevailing numbers. Total 49 more or less painted, and the total has been an interesting battle back and forth. Slow starts, they've been par for the course for both of these teams through the first 11 weeks of this season. The Eagles averaging just 1.4 points per game in the first quarter, better than only the Rams and the Bears. The Rams averaging 1.3 in that particular department. Rams haven't scored a single point in the first quarter of their last 3 games. So while they're putting up crooked numbers and performing well, they haven't exactly given themselves the competitive advantage right out of the gates. Meanwhile, Philadelphia, they've now won 6 straight games since their bye. They came back in Week 5. They've had the best scoring defense and total defense in the NFL during that win streak. Second team in the last 30 years to outgain their opponents by 100-plus total yards in 6 straight games within a season, joining the 2019 San Francisco 49ers. And Eagles fans will tell you it's as simple as if A.J. Brown is healthy and active versus A.J. Brown not being on the field. The offense with A.J. Brown averaging nearly 30 points per game, without Brown in the mix, 17.3, and they have indeed been road warriors under Nick Sirianni's leadership. But the Rams on the other side, I mean, this is a team, we've talked about it at great lengths. When they're healthy at the skill positions, they can be extremely dynamic, going 9-4 over the last 2 seasons when they have Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua. And for the Rams, Payne, they've done an outstanding job protecting an aging quarterback in the pocket as the offensive line health has trended up. Rob Havenstein was a DMP at Wednesday, remains a game-time decision, still a long shot. But when you try and assess where the Eagles are now versus a Rams team that has seen strong pressure rates defensively, but some questions on the back end, just feels like such an interesting chess match for the Rams to try and attack a Philadelphia defense that's been outstanding. And on the other side, Philadelphia trying to figure out exactly if they can keep Jalen Hurts playing at this high level.
Yeah, there is. This one's a fun one. I think this has some entertainment value to it if you're looking for certain things, and multiple, I would say, elements stand out to me as being extremely important in determining the outcome of this game. I think we talked ahead of, we did Commanders-Eagles last Thursday, I'm pretty sure.
We 100% did Thursday Night Football.
So I think maybe there's one thing worth revisiting, and then a couple interesting determinants in this game. And the first, obviously, Jalen Hurts and his pressure splits. The young guys up front for the Rams are starting to really grow together, and they are getting after it. And Jared Verse right now, number 2 in pressure rate. As a team, the Rams are top 5 in pressure rate now. Jordan Mailata returning last week helped the Eagles. Hurts only dealt with pressure on 33% of his dropbacks. It's down. That was down like 9% from the season-long number. But he's going to face some pressure here against the Rams. And we look at Hurts, and he's been one of the most sensitive quarterbacks to pressure. Completion rate dips 28%. Yards per pass attempt drop 4 yards. The other thing that's a little bit of a factor here, when Hurts has dealt with pressure, typically the guy he is going to a little bit more is Devonta Smith. And so we'll have to keep our eyes on that situation. Was on the injury report with a hamstring heading into the Washington game, seen after the game limping around, was not at practice on Wednesday in any capacity. The other thing here is the Rams live in zone coverage, and they haven't been great at it, but they do play it at the 5th highest rate. Eagles are exponentially better against man coverage. As to your point, A.J. Brown is a man beater. He has been less effective against zone. Jalen Hurts has been less effective against zone, so something to think about there. We've also seen the Eagles increase their run rates since the Week 5 bye. The offensive linemen were vocal during that bye week about leaning into the run game more, and that's been the case, right? Saquon has really carried this Eagles offense. I think he's the most valuable part to it, as crazy as that potentially sounds when you think about football in 2024 and a running back maybe being the most impactful player. But, boy, he fits that system so well. They've really just leaned on him since the bye. The other area where the Rams defense has improved is against the run. 30% of runs have been successful since week 6, minus 0.23 EPA per rush allowed, 4th best mark. So the Rams defense has just been different up front since their bye week. And I'm told those 4 young kids all get along. They all love each other. They're all workers. They are first in the building, last to leave. They're, working out together off to the side. That was a common occurrence at Florida State. It's just interesting to see how that's meshed really well. On the other side of the ball, we also discussed the emergence of the young Eagles defenders, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Nakobe Dean, Jalen Carter. Talked about them ahead of that Commanders game. Believe we praised them as well in the good section on Monday. They have been a huge reason for the Eagles' defensive resurgence. And some will question the schedule. just as they did leading up to the Commanders game. But the
Bengals
and Commanders are in that sample size.
I'm going to raise my hand as one of those people, but they did silence some of that concern on Thursday against the Commanders.
Yeah. Well, I thought they had a really good effort in Cincinnati as well. Now, I know, was T. Higgins out?
He was out for that one. They played.
Okay.
They made great adjustments at halftime. The Bengals moved the ball in the first half and completely bogged down after the break.
I just wonder if the Rams receivers, which is the best part of the offense, can continually win against maybe quicker, more athletic, younger corners.
It's a different style receiver, too. It's not a big and physical guy. It's a precision route running, which will make for a fascinating matchup.
The other interesting thing here is the Eagles have gone to more man coverage this season as Vic Fangio's grown more confident in the abilities of those young cover corners. Stafford is 24th in EPA per dropback against man coverage. He's been better against zone. This offense has been better against zone. It makes sense, right? Cooper Kupp, smart, good route runner, can find the hole in the zone. Puka Nacua, find the hole in the zone. And so, on a surface level, you're looking at the Eagles and Rams, and you're thinking offense, and there's been a battle on this total, right? One group went over 48. As we were recording Monday and doing look-ahead lines, it was moving, and we said, boy, if this got to 51, there would be a massive buy order on the under, is what I had been told on Sunday night. That group did not wait for 51. They took out the 50.5, they took out the 50, and that's why we are sitting here between 48.5 and 49.5 as we record this late Thursday morning. So another battle here on the total. Sure, there are things the Eagles can do. We talked last week about their increased rate of play-action passing. And so certainly you can put those Rams linebackers in conflict. They have a very difficult time covering, and the reemergence of Dallas Goedert would be huge in that role. But overarching, there are some things the Rams defense in terms of pressure, in terms of coverage, that have given the Eagles offense some troubles. And the same thing is true on the other side. The Eagles defense playing a little bit more man coverage, and certainly Matthew Stafford has not been as good against that. So this to me is a extremely interesting game. It's two teams again that, the Eagles are what they are in terms of record, and maybe they're not as good as their record indicates. And then we've also seen the Rams play at a peak level before that puts them in the conversation of competing in the NFC. We just really haven't gotten that peak enough this season. And you would expect it more now that they're healthier, but didn't really love the offensive performance against the Dolphins. And so on paper, Eagles defense certainly a lot tougher than the Dolphins. You also have the Vic Fangio experience where he coached that Dolphins defense last year. Obviously, it's vastly different, but he knows the personnel, and he knows what that personnel was able to do against this Rams offense. So he's going to be able to glean a little bit more from the film, I would think, based upon knowing a lot of those players over there in Miami last season. So it's a really interesting one to me here.
Yeah, I think it should be fascinating to see, what it means for Philadelphia continuing to hope for a slip up from the Detroit Lions, that they could gain a little bit of ground in their quest to be the number one seed in the NFC, and of course for the Rams, setting their sights on remaining relevant and competitive, not just for the wild card, but to try and have a chance to win the NFC West, creating a home game for them in the opening round of the playoffs. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And best bet portion of the program, Payne, I know we kicked around a boatload of ideas.
Yep.
Should we punt the ball down?
Here's what I will say, okay. And everyone's like, "Oh, here Payne goes on another diatribe."
No, diatribes are good. We like those. Whether the listeners.
So I said at the top, this board right now is extremely thin. There's about 5 games that have some battles. There's a game or two that I'm interested in around key numbers right now that I think are potentially going to get there. I am fine if you want to go with the one that we discussed. However, this is maybe the difference in why this podcast has made it 11 years. I understand the results have not been good this season. They're not up to par. But we've had 10 straight winning years prior to this year, and we can be 1-10 right now in the NFL, and the information is still very good. That's why we're beating the NFL market by about 2 points per game this season. Very few people can say they're 1-10 and doing that. So we aren't. I didn't get in this space to create content. I got into it because I thought it was a viable business, but I'm a better first, and so I'm not going to give out a pick just for content's sake. So I don't have anything that I absolutely love right now. I'm happy waiting until later in the week. We can give out something on the Twitter feed. This will not be on the site because you guys are very loyal and crash the site every single time we put something on the site. So we're going to use Elon's X servers here, and we'll post something on our X account at BetTheBoardPod. So that'll go up sometime between now and Sunday, unless you absolutely love.
No. I think that's probably best.
Okay.
I mean, as I go through it, small positions in the portfolio this week, one total long gone. That we dabbled with on Monday, and don't want to give anything out that we haven't already bet or have plans to bet in the imminent future. So I think that's probably the best approach. And I know, look, it's not what we want to try and do for our listeners, but the reality of it is we value their bankrolls more than anybody and want to make sure that we're getting their money in.
Well, the same as ours.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Right?
We're not here trying to give out a bet for the sake of giving out a bet.
Yeah.
So
on the same page.
Yep. So we will hold off on that. We will distribute on social media and be able to make that happen. So anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No. Good movement yesterday on the college bet. No surprise there. So
now the hard part is just got to win for us.
Yeah. So look for the NFL best bet on. Well, I wouldn't say on, but before Sunday, certainly at Bet the Board Pod. Newsletter. I know people asked, we'll be back this week. If you are not really ingrained completely in the space, Thursday night through, I would call it early Saturday morning, there were a couple of the key forward-facing companies that were going through some changes in their system and how they are going to be presenting props moving forward. And so only about 10% of the prop menus were available Friday morning. And so game day comes around Saturday, Sunday. You and I are both a little swamped. So that is the reason there was no newsletter last week. For those wondering if it went out, did I not get it? We'll have one this Friday.
As always, look, it's a business above all else, and if the offerings aren't there, it kind of handcuffs us a little bit in terms of the information that we are able to disseminate with our listeners. So keep monitoring the Bet the Board social media feeds. The best bet for the NFL will be up there when we make that particular play actionable. But in the interim, best of luck with all of your NFL Week 12 investments, whether they fall on Thursday night or you're building your card for the Sunday slate. For Payne Insider, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Best of luck, and come Sunday afternoon with an investment still TBD. We'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.